And you, and you, and you, and you were there. Some of it wasn't very nice, but most of it was beautiful.
And
Hello
we
and
we have
welcome back to
returned.
Dream Idiots. After a lovely 2 week hiatus, this is Morris and the other fella is Bryan. We hope you enjoyed your 2 weeks off from us, but we're back. Hope you were able to pass along our re-presentations of episodes 12 and 15 over the last couple weeks. But we are recharged, ready to go with episode 40. And Bryan, how did you like my little part of the country when you came up last week to
It
beautiful
was
Colorado?
delightful. Yeah, we had the what I'm calling the Dream Idiots quarterly staff meeting. Went to Red Rocks, saw an amazing concert,
They
and
didn't play long enough, though. I mean, that
uh,
was like just
I think it's still going on. And it does. It was. I think I'm not sure, but I think some bad apples might have been smoking the reefer while we were there.
there was
Uh,
definitely a green cloud over the Red Rocks
yeah,
when we were there.
yeah,
Folks, if you ever have
unreal.
the chance to see King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard in concert, do it.
Yeah,
It's an
top
amazing
top
show.
five concert for me, probably all time. That
Uh,
was
yeah, same here.
amazing. Yeah, very, very, very good show.
So, Bryan, where can the good folks go to find out more about our little corner of the world here? That is
You
Dream
can
Idiots.
you can check us out at dreamidiots.com. We are on Instagram and on Facebook. You can write to us at dreamidiots.podcast at Gmail. Please like us and share us and follow us on whatever platform you're listening to us on. If you have a topic you want to suggest, we've actually gotten a couple other Halloween topics so that someone wants us to cover.
Oh,
Maybe you have
okay.
a maybe you have a curse word you want me to do. We can do that as well. So reach out to us, share our stuff, let us know what you think. Our listeners are definitely trending up, and that's always a good sign. And you can also, if you go to dreamidiots.com, you can click on the merchandise and check out our swag as well. I got some good stuff there too.
Now, as I mentioned earlier, it's episode 40. It's an even episode, which means I'll go first. But Bryan, you had an update, a rather unpleasant update, I think, on one of the stories that you've been following, right?
Very, very, very briefly. On two prior episodes, we talked about a guy named Alan Eugene Miller. He's the guy who was on death row in Alabama. And if you've heard about this story either with us or elsewhere, Alabama, he's the only person, at least at present, who has been sent to the death chamber and actually survived. Three of the last four executions that Alabama has attempted, they have botched. This guy is still alive, and it's just disgusting. But there is a very good article, published on October 2nd, just on Atlantic Online. It's not in the magazine. Article by a woman named Elizabeth Brunig, who goes into the entire botched execution. I only read about half of it. It is a absolutely fucking brutal story. She apparently works in the space, writes in the space. Miller actually asked her to be present, so he knows her, and so she was there at his request and witnessed the absolute debacle that was this attempt of execution. So anyway, the link to this article I'm going to put in the show notes for anyone that is interested. But be forewarned, it is it's a read that's will make your skin crawl, I think. So
I made
it's
it about a
awful.
third of the way through it, Bryan. I read it about an hour before we started recording, and I made it about a third of the
Yeah,
way through it and said, I'll
it
need to finish this later.
yeah, it
This
definitely
is
makes you wince or something. It's tough.
so Bryan will have that up on the next on our sources and stuff for the episode. Well, let's get started with my segment of the episode. Bryan, how do you feel about dimes?
Dimes,
Dimes, yeah, like the little
as in the
coins. Yeah.
coin.
Yeah.
I'm ambivalent about dimes. I prefer them to nickels, but I don't really have a strong opinion on dimes.
Okay, I see what you're doing. This question has nothing to do with today's topic. I just
Uh-huh.
wanted to make sure that myself and the listeners that we know where you stand on dimes
Okay.
when the shit comes down between the different kinds of currencies.
Uh,
Because here at Dream Idiots, we don't return from a hiatus with a bang. We return with a what? Huh? What? No, this
I'm
has nothing to do with dimes. This
okay.
segment that I'm going to talk about today came about when recent coverage of Hurricane Ian and our uh, our hearts and sympathies go out to the folks who've been affected by that out on the East Coast and elsewhere. There was a news anchor, and this news anchor uttered the following, and I'm paraphrasing here, but it was roughly like this. In reference to the damage inflicted upon Puerto Rico, quote, roughly quote, paraphrasing, "It's a good thing we have better infrastructure in this country."
Oh, right.
So what's problematic about that statement, Brian?
Puerto Rico has been a part of these United States
For a long,
for
long
125.
time.
I mean, like the 1870s. I mean, long ass time.
Well, funny you should mention that, Brian.
Right.
Just prior to World War II, the United States had 8 inhabited territories. 8 inhabited territories. So I'm not including on this list things like Howland Island, Wake Island, things that do not have indigenous
Population,
folks on
right.
it. Yeah, it just has maybe a military base or military outpost.
Right.
So I can only get 5 of the 8. Can you name the 8 inhabited territories we had just prior to World War II?
No, I cannot. No. So Puerto Rico.
That's one.
Other inhabited U.S. territories. American Samoa.
Yep.
Florida. No. Other American. U.S. Virgin Islands.
That's 3.
I'm dying to say Bermuda, but I think that's UK or Dutch. Shoot, I think that's all I got.
Guam.
Oh fuck, I should have known Guam. Yeah, okay.
The Philippines.
The Philippines?
You already said Puerto Rico, right? You said the U.S. Virgin Islands. Did you say the U.S. Virgin Islands? I don't think you did. You say okay.
Yeah.
Guam, American Samoa, and then the 3 I missed because I was being a real dumb butt. Hawaii and Alaska prior to statehood territories.
Right.
And then the one that really tripped me out, the Panama Canal Zone was considered a territory.
Oh, okay.
Or it was ceded back to Panama in 1979. But the reason I bring this up is because I want to talk a little bit about something that happened to the Philippines at the end of World War II. But this comes from a book I've been reading. I'm about finished with it, called How to Hide an Empire by Daniel Immerwahr, a history professor out of Northwestern. It's a fantastic look at basically a history of what he calls the greater United States, the places I just talked about. And in 1940, just prior to World War II, take a guess. What percentage of the U.S. population resided in the territories? A percentage.
What percentage?
2%. Wow. 18,833,023 people resided in the territories, for a grand total of that being 12.5% of Americans lived in the 12.5%.
Way higher than
131 million, almost 131.7 million folks resided in the mainland, for a total of 150 million 0.5 people just prior to 1940. I would not have guessed as high as 12.5%. 12.5% is amazing to me.
Right.
That many folks lived in the territory. The majority of them in the Philippines. So let's talk a little bit about the Philippines. Predominantly colonized by the Spanish from 1565 to 1898. The British forces had a little bit of occupation there, 1762 to 1764. They celebrate June 12th as Independence Day from Spain, when the United States defeated Spain in the Spanish-American War. The Philippine-American War lasted from 1899, February, through July of 1902, and it was annexed as a result of the Treaty of Paris. The U.S. gave Spain $20 million for the Philippines. And from that time forward, for a period of 44 years, the Philippines were a territory. And ostensibly, the American role in the Philippines was one of what they called tutelage, right? Building a better democracy. Here's how you do it, so forth and so on. And of course, in World War II, Manila fell, as a lot of places did in the Pacific, to the Japanese forces, and the Japanese occupation of Manila occurred from 42 to 45. And as that fell apart, when MacArthur returned, there were a variety of groups vying for control. And I'm not going to get into the specifics of it because I want to leave that for folks to read the book because the book is great. When I use a book like this, I don't want to take all of the air out of the book. I want to leave room for someone to sit and read it because he does a terrific job of going through the different histories of the different territories. But there was a group of guerrillas that were supported by MacArthur and his forces because MacArthur had pledged to return to Manila. I shall return, as they swept through and defeated the Japanese forces. So I'm going to read a little bit from Immerwahr's book. In August of 1945, the War Department announced after the war, after World War II, that it would require 2.5 million soldiers for the next year in 1946. This did not sit well with the folks at home.
Mm-hmm.
Truman received 60,000 postcards in a single day demanding that the troops be sent home. At the rate we are demobilizing troops in a very short time, his group argued, we will have no means by which we can enforce our demands in the Pacific. So let's take a look at this. This was, for many, the last straw. Days after Truman's announcement, 20,000 GIs marched in Manila and gathered at the ruins of the legislative building. They wanted to go home, of course. That was the main thing, and for some, the only thing. Yet others, including the leaders, had seen the Asian Spring firsthand and objected strenuously to being kept around to suppress it. Quote, "Let us leave the Chinese and Filipinos to take care of their own internal affairs," one soldier said. "The Filipinos are our allies. We ain't going to fight them." The demonstrators read a letter of support from the Filipino Democratic Alliance. That was one of the many groups that was, trying to oust the Japanese.
Right, sure.
The organizers, meanwhile, passed a resolution declaring solidarity with the Filipino guerrillas. Lieutenant General W.D. Styler, commanding general of the Army forces in the West Pacific, addressed the men by radio. He pointed to the vast new tasks that the United States must undertake in Asia, but the men didn't listen. They booed and catcalled, drowning out whole paragraphs of his speech. And Immerwahr has a lovely picture of this sign being held up that says, "We shall never forget. Words are cheap. Send us home." And it's being held up by American soldiers, right, in World War II. The Manila protest, and this is the interesting part, because I don't remember being taught this in high school. The Manila protest set off a string of other protests. 20,000 soldiers protested in Honolulu, 3,000 in Korea, 5,000 in Calcutta. On Guam, the men burned the Secretary of War in effigy, and more than 3,000 sailors staged a hunger strike. Protests erupted in China, Burma, Japan, France, Germany, Britain, and Austria too, with supporting demonstrations in Washington, Chicago, and New York. "What kind of government is this?" asked one of the soldiers. "What are we that scream piously, 'The world must be free,' and then keep it to ourselves?" That sentiment animated the most dogged of the protesters. Another GI complained that in the Oriental surge towards freedom, we cling to imperialism. All the members of the 823rd Engineer Aviation Battalion in Burma, and we talked about Burma several episodes ago, an African-American unit sent Truman a letter saying that they were disgusted with the undemocratic American foreign policy. They did not want to be associated with the shooting and bombing to death, the freedom urge of the peoples of these Southeast Asiatic countries. We do not want to unify China with bayonets and bombing planes. That to me is astonishing that this happened at the end of World War II.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I'd brought this up and asked anybody this question, when did soldiers protest their own involvement in the war? I would have said, well, Vietnam's veterans against the war. I would have thought of guys like
I've never heard this before.
Bill Earhart, right? The poet that came it spoke to us in college, who'd written books about this, who was at Swarthmore and did all these protesting. But here these guys in World War II went and did this, right? So what did America do? And here's where I'm reminded of Eddie Izzard's bit about all the world leaders getting together at the end of World War II. Everybody give up your colonies. England, what's that behind your back? Is that India? July 4th, 1946 is celebrated as Independence Day from the United States. Now, in the intervening decades with the Philippines, what's it best remembered for, Bryan?
Oh, well, Ferdinand Marcos.
Ferdinand and Imelda Marcos.
Right.
How would you describe that particular administration?
Oh, vaguely autocratic, fascist, over the top. I mean, Imelda and her, 3,000 pairs of shoes.
Corrupt.
Yeah, absolutely corrupt. They just, they sucked, they bled the country dry.
Howard Zinn, historian Howard Zinn, would agree with
Sure.
you. He said, quote, ran the Philippines ruthlessly and amassed a huge fortune before being finally overthrown in 1988. And of course, until June of this last year, the most recent president was Rodrigo Duterte,
Mm-hmm.
who himself was accused of many, many human rights violations,
Right.
who talked of
Complete
just
train wreck,
shooting
right.
people randomly in the street.
Yeah,
A
Corazon
wonderful,
Aquino was assassinated. I mean, right. Yeah.
yeah, a wonderful national populist of which we have no, similar corollary here in the United States.
Not at all.
The only president of the Philippines not to declare his personal assets. So again, no corollary here in the United States. Do you know who the current Philippine president is, Bryan?
I do not. Is it is it actually Marcos Child? No.
Ferdinand Bong Bong Marcos Jr.
That's my
He
middle
goes
name.
by Bong Bong.
Oh yeah.
Bong Bong.
Mm-hmm.
Bryan.
Bong bong?
Bong Bong.
Bong bong. Good.
So I don't know what all this says. I don't know what all it means. I guess it kind of goes to that old saying that you can get what you want and still not be very happy. And I have no claim to a great sense of history for the Philippines or for the territory. That's what guys like Daniel Imawar are for in their excellent books. But how bad are your growing pains as a burgeoning democracy when you're dealing with the kind of things that we've seen corrupt our democracy? The proliferation of money, the influence of colonialism that exists, even when you have the very men who are fighting for these ideals saying, no, we shouldn't be doing this. Leave these folks alone.
Right.
I don't know. It's just something that I think about a lot when I look at when we talk about what good has our country done, and we have done many, many good things. Don't get me wrong, but there's also this history of fucking about where perhaps we shouldn't be fucking about after a while. And
yeah, not minding our business, and I don't know, having this this righteous involvement in anything.
Yeah, and this whole idea of tutelage. I mean, what does that mean, tutelage? I mean,
well, it means servitude, essentially. It's we're better than you, and we need you to accept, acknowledge and accept the fact that we are superior. This would all go much simpler. It'd be much faster if you just understood that you were somehow inept or in some way inferior. Basically,
because that's the voice of the colonizer. No matter whether you're coming waving flags of democracy or flags of the monarchy, right? I mean,
right.
that's the
right.
basic language of the colonizer. So
right. Find land, stick your flag in it, and then dominate anyone that's there.
Yes, and the beatings will continue until the morale improves. Anyway, that's kind of all I really wanted to talk about, just kind of to get rest again with doing weekly episodes. But I highly recommend this book, Daniel Imawar's 2019 book, How to Hide an Empire, A History of the Greater United States. If you're at all interested in what he does, is he goes back to the very origins of all these territories and colonies, and he brings it up to the present day. It's really a remarkable read if you're interested at all particularly in post-World War II America and the history of what happened to all these places. And of course, some of them became states, Alaska and Hawaii. And those histories are very fascinating as to how we got a hold of those. And Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands. And that is one thing that I wanted to close with was the notes on, yes, our last one. The last thing I wanted to close with is the current population status of populations of our territories.
Mm-hmm.
So we have lost in the 2020 population census, we've lost Hawaii, Alaska, the Panama Canal Zone, and the Philippines, right? And the Philippines was a big hit because that was 18 million folks.
Right.
We have gained the Northern Mariana Islands. So the total population of our territories today stand at 3.6 million people.
So 1%.
Total population of the U.S. is 334 million people. So the total population for the territories is 1.08%. So it is decreased significantly, mainly with the liberation of the Philippines. Puerto Rico now stands as the most populous of the U.S. territories, where those folks are indeed U.S. citizens.
Wow.
Sources for this piece were Daniel Imwar's How to Hide an Empire from 2019, Howard Zinn's Declarations of Independence, another great book from 1990, and Wikipedia for current population stats and basic info on the territories.
Nice. Well, if, those damn Puerto Ricans would just learn to be American, we wouldn't, all their problems would be solved, right?
It's enraging. And it's
Or
the same
whatever.
people over and over again who insist, well, if they ran it like our country.
Right. Are you confusing it with Cuba? What's the
I think that's what's happening 90% of the time.
Right.
They can't tell the difference between Cuba and Puerto Rico.
Right. Yeah. Well, all those brown people they all look the same, so you can't
Islands
really,
are kind of shaped alike. It's
whatever. You can't ask us to differentiate. Come on. That requires critical thinking and empathy. So can't do that. All right. Nice job. Thanks for that.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Shifting gears here quickly. You ready?
I am never ready for this, Brian, but I shall endeavor to do my best. What do you have for me?
The Dream Idiot's curse word of the week.
All right. So this is a story that I don't know. I just had to use this. So I gave you a hint about this one, and I didn't give you the results of this. So NASA decided to send a spaceship out to the 7th planet in our solar system, and they announced online they were having a competition to name this spaceship.
Okay.
You know what's coming. So they posted online. Yeah. And they asked for requests. Please name the probe that we're sending to Uranus. Yep, they actually posted that online, and they thought people were going to take it seriously. And people didn't. People made jokes out of it. God damn it. You should just learn to take things seriously. In my estimation, the best non-joke suggestion was Tenzing Norgay. That's a great name. Great to honor
everybody needs a Tenzing Norgay.
Yeah, great to honor a perhaps lesser known figure from exploration, etc.
Who may have actually been the first person up there and not the other guy.
Right. So yeah, Morris and I, full disclosure, we're both a little bit of Everest enthusiasts, so have read quite a bit about Everest and that part of the world. So cool to see his name pop up. I'll just quickly give you the ones that made me laugh were the USS Dark Star, the Starfish.
Oh God.
Deep Impaction. And the one at the top of the list, Proby McProbeface.
Of course.
So anyway, there you have it. I think the naming competition has closed. I'm not sure. I didn't see what they've chosen, if they have chosen one yet. So anyway, NASA is sending a probe to Uranus, and people thought that was funny. So
is the Dark Star a reference to? Is that a reference to the John Carpenter film, or is that a
yes,
reference to? Because that's a. I mean,
I think that's a reference to a sphincter, but I'm not completely sure.
And what was the name of the cosmic starfish? What was the name of the star? Just the starfish.
Just the starfish. Deep Impaction, which that personally is my favorite. Idiots.
And Proby McProbeface, of course, is a callback to was it the icebreaker that they up in Canada?
For icebreaker for Norway. I forget where it was.
Canada, or Bodie McBoatface.
Bodie McBoatface, yeah.
Proby McProbeface.
And I think they actually named it that, didn't they?
Well, it is kind of a contract when you have these naming contests.
Right.
That
Yes, you can't just willy-nilly, pull out whatever the Bob Barker, which is what that one preservation group did. So there you go. Just a little bit of silliness here in the middle. So for my segment this week, I don't know. I did a bunch of research, and I originally was going to talk about the endless array of things that you and I were taught in the delightful institution of education that is public education in Texas, and talk about the extraneous things that we were taught as were basically sacrosanct as kids, as whatever teenagers, that are basically no longer true, are basically shown to be not true. And in doing some research, I kind of took a little bit of a left turn, and we're going to talk a little bit here, maybe more broadly, about education and facts and truth. And I decided to stay out of the weeds of some of these individual issues that come up. There are lots of issues, maybe in Texas especially. Maybe this is true everywhere, but Texas history and things like the Battle of the Alamo, things that are taught in public school are not necessarily as accurate as maybe they could be. So instead of doing that, we're going to talk more broadly about kind of the nature of science and truth and facts, and how we should, at least in my estimation, do a better job of approaching the task of, I don't know, for lack of a better term, intuition and critical thinking. So you have likely heard the term half-life, the half-life of elements.
Sure.
So the half-life of an element, half-life of iridium or iron is a critical process that is used to determine the age of something. Once it's geologists can dig in and figure out how old a rock sample is based on its half-life, because these elements deteriorate at known rates. This term has now been used a little bit, and there's now the term called the half-life of facts, which is what I was kind of what I was speaking to. And it's the half-life of facts that causes textbooks to become irrelevant over time, and why textbooks have to be updated and changed and rewritten, because new information is learned over time, and some things are deemed to be untrue that used to be true, etc. So there is decay in facts and in their accuracy. So broadly speaking, across the sciences in general, there is now this notion that the half-life of facts is right around 50 years. Half of the information that was taught in textbooks in 1972 is now absolutely not true. But the problem is that number varies significantly based on field of study and a number of other things. It can be actually quite a bit shorter than 50 years. It can be quite a bit longer than 50 years. But it depends on the nature of the work, nature of the research, what findings are discovered over time, how they're developed, how they're processed and analyzed, et cetera, over time. So you have this sort of data creep issue where things are never true permanently. And I think that when you and I were kids, I won't speak for you. When I was a kid, when I was taught something, I was given a rule. I assumed that was going to be true, and it's true now. And it's true forever. That's a childlike perspective of things. So you and I, presumably in, I think, second or third grade, that would have been when you and I first learned about dinosaurs. And as I recall, I have a very clear memory of learning about dinosaurs, thinking they're just about the coolest thing I'd ever seen in my entire life. And we learned about Tyrannosaurus Rex and the pterodactyl and Triceratops and the Brontosaurus. And the Brontosaurus is this gigantic lumbering beast that was an herbivore, may have been an omnivore. But it turns out they discovered over time that the Brontosaurus is not actually one species of animal. It's actually a genus. So there actually are, I think, 3, maybe 4 other species of animals that fall under the category of Brontosaur. So science learned something, right? So we were taught that Brontosaur was one animal. Now in fact, it is 3 or 4, and that data point has now changed, and it's now being presented differently in these textbooks. Another great example of where science learned something that they didn't used to know. We were taught, I recall this clearly as well, being taught that dinosaurs lived for a very, very long period of time, and then something big and bad happened, and all the dinosaurs went away. But when we were first learning about it, no one knew what that really was. Something bad happened, dinosaurs went away.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, we talked about that. Episode 13, the Chicxulub crater. Now, if you're working in this field, studying this field, now I haven't seen this, but presumably there is quite a bit of academic work and research and presentation of the data that says, guess what? There was a gigantic, 6 mile wide meteor that landed just off the Yucatan Peninsula in the Gulf of Mexico at Chicxulub, Mexico, and that's the event that did all this. We were not taught that when we were kids. So I think it's very interesting to consider how truth and fact can change over time. And I appreciate the fact that this is not a simple or easy or quick process. And so I think there's something about that is sort of compelling, especially in the time of the GOP in this country and Donald Trump. So to back up one small step, just because I wanted to make sure I knew exactly what I was talking about, I decided to look up some very, very basic terms. So straight from Wikipedia, straight from the OED. What is a fact? So a fact is a datum. A fact is a piece of data about one or more aspects of a circumstance, which, if accepted as true and proven true, allows a conclusion to be made based on it being either true or false. Scientific facts are verifiable and repeatable. Something that is known to be a truth is the property of being in accordance with a fact or reality. So, in essence, post-truth was that word that was termed by, I think was a newspaper in the UK, but post-truth was the word of the year for 2016. And there was all that horse shit with Kellyanne Conway spewing on Fox News about
alternative facts.
My alternative facts, also known as fucking falsehoods, are just as good as your facts. No, they are fucking not, Kellyanne. So one more, a couple other, pieces of terminology here. The term theory, a scientific theory, it is a well confirmed, repeatedly confirmed explanation of nature. It's made in a consistent way. It adheres to scientific method, and it fulfills the criteria necessitated by modern science. It's not just a fucking guess. So theories are described in such a way that scientific tests should be able to prove them or disprove them. Right? This is what scientists do, what researchers do: attempt to prove and prove again and prove again and prove again, or disprove again and again and again this theory, right? And so this is a scientific theory is something that is based on a boatload of work and reliable, comprehensive, and just rigorous, nonstop work, right? Which is why this half-life in some of these fields takes so damn long. So that gives us a very basic but broad foundation. See, the scientific community is in the pursuit of doing this type of research and analysis, and in scientists, and that I include in that those that work in the medical field or the social sciences, sociologists, political scientists, anyone who's crunching data, anyone at all that is involved in the analysis and collection of information. These people are the ones in our world who are the least likely, they are the most reluctant to make grand pronouncements about anything, right? So when you see something you see a headline that is "Scientists discover X," and then they interview the scientist the scientist invariably says, well, we just don't really know. We're not really sure. We have this data point that seems to be a bit of an outlier, but we're not really sure what this might mean, because they are incredibly reluctant to take ownership of something that is not backed up by a treasure trove of empirical and repeated testing and information, right?
Yeah, pump the brake speed, buggy. We're not there yet.
Right, exactly. And so they dive into these things repeatedly and do as much as they possibly can to have confidence in data that they are presenting, and they are want to make any major conclusion, especially if that conclusion deviates from something that is already collectively accepted in that field, right? And so it is very, very difficult and takes a lot of time and effort to make something that is currently a fact into a non-fact. You can't do that overnight.
No, gotcha.
What's that?
No, I got you. No, I'm
Okay.
I grok. I get it. Yeah,
You got it. So my joke is, I mean, it's perfectly fine for me to have the theory that the key to longevity in human beings is to have a diet that is, made up entirely of bacon grease and roofing shingles, right? This is I can set this up as an experiment and do a number of tests on myself that are going to yield some pretty terrible fucking results, because I'm going to be dead really quickly, right? There's not a lot of evidence to support my theory that this diet will do anything but just kill me. So there's one more definition we're gonna talk about briefly: a delusion. So a delusion this is again straight from the Old English Dictionary. A delusion is a false fixed belief that is not amenable to change in light of conflicting evidence. I find these definitions a little bit sort of grounding, because sometimes when I'm thinking about something at length, I'd like to go back to the very, very basic elements. Like, do I really know what I'm thinking about when you consider the very, very most basic terminology about a certain question? So a delusion is something that is difficult to refute for the person that is carrying that delusion. The distinction between a delusion and just an idea that is strongly held is difficult to make, and it basically depends on the degree of conviction to which the belief is held, right? So, if the amount of evidence that is beginning to contradict that belief is becoming more and more compelling, and there's more evidence to it, so therefore it has more veracity. If you still then refuse to reconsider your position, then you're suffering from a delusion. So, in other words, it's likely that after my first attempt at my bacon grease covered roofing shingle, I'm probably going to start changing my mind. After I've ingested 5 or 6 of them, I'm going to be shitting blood in the hospital, right? And so,
if you're lucky,
if I'm lucky, if at that point I still think that my theory has merit, then I'm obviously delusional. So, in reading and watching the news really now for several years, and then listening to some of the things I've been listening to recently, I have this huge fundamental concern about just the state of our society and the willingness of a staggering number of people to believe things that are demonstrably false. I think that is just stupid. And at the end of the day, the thing that really bothers me the most about it is that it's just fucking dangerous. Texans and other places as well in this country, but I live in Texas, and so I'm going to focus on it. Texans think that they are safer with unimpeded access to handguns. That is demonstrably and compellingly false. That is not true. It has never been true. People think also in Texas that abstinence only sex ed programs in high school will prevent pregnancies among teenagers. Again, complete unmitigated horseshit. That's not true. If you teach teenagers that they should just not have sex ever, guess what they do? They go fuck. People think God is looking out for them. He's not. how many pieces of evidence do you need through our history of people like Seventh-day Adventists and Millerites who were convinced that the rapture was about to happen and who at midnight on the appointed day leapt off the top of the building convinced that God was going to catch them? That happened a lot.
And that's why they called it the Great Disappointment.
Exactly, right. And still, I was listening recently to Carrie Lake, that crackpot from Arizona, who's going on and on about all the treasure trove of compelling information that shows that Trump won the election. Oh, seriously? I mean, I'm mind blown by the fact that there are. I mean, happily, there are people you hear now and again where that initially bought the lie and they're now coming around to the fact, oh shit, there is no evidence. Okay. But there are still people who think Trump won and somehow this election was stolen, and in spite of any evidence, these are people who are. I mean, it is now. It's not just delusion; it is true mental disease.
She strikes me as the kind of person who wanders into a bar holding a steaming pile of horse shit and saying to everyone, "Hey, look what I almost stepped in."
Right. So I don't know. I went down this rabbit hole, and this is where I sort of wound up. One other example here. Anyone with even a lick of sense, obviously, knows that the world is round, right? It's not quite a sphere; it's real close to a sphere. But there are people out there that claim Christopher Columbus proved it was round when he sailed west, and that at that time he and everyone else, at least those that were worried about such things, thought the world was flat. As we discussed, most folks in medieval times, or even much later, were probably only concerned about not shitting themselves to death. But this whole world being flat versus the world being round, no one ever thought that. No one did. People that were looking at these things knew that the world was round going back to, I think, the 3rd century BC. So Columbus was sailing west because he knew the world was fucking around. So he was looking for the West Indies. He didn't hit the West Indies. He hit the Caribbean basically, but he knew he was going to hit islands, and he was right. He wasn't surprised. By the year 2022, there is a shitload of science and technology and aeronautics and transportation and GPS and a whole host of bullshit that hinges on the fact that the world is a fucking sphere. Every space program we've had going back to the 50s, Gemini, Apollo, Mercury, Space Shuttle, Space Station. How many photographs do we have of the fucking Earth at this point? How many thousands of hours of film footage and video footage do we have? And the Earth never turns into a disc in the back of a photograph, right? We can see. I mean, it's irrefutable that the world is round. So how is it possible that in 2018 there was a group founded called the New Flat Earth Society? Mind is fucking blown. I'm not delusional. I personally like discovering things, learning new truths, learning new facts. I don't care about being told that I'm wrong about something. When I have a closely held belief that is then refuted by a compelling argument or a compelling set of facts that refute it, I'm happy to take that information on. Perfect example. I know for a fact that I'm probably 50 pounds overweight, and I know for a fact that because of that, I have high blood pressure and my heart rate should be higher than it should be. I'm not delusional about it. I'm not telling anyone that I'm svelte and going to go be a ballerina somewhere, right? I'm very aware of the fact that God doesn't have a plan for me. I know that there's no higher being looking out for me. I don't have that delusion. I have this thirst for knowledge. I want to learn things I don't know, but I don't understand the society we're in at this point, because it feels like we are just corrupted by a profound delusion that is based in self-interest, perhaps, because learning is now useless and time-consuming and a pointless endeavor, because you can now just make up the shit that you want to be true and say it's true. And at this point, it just feels like an incredibly slippery slope, and one that may not be reversible, and that America has a half-life of its own.
And that's how you return from a 2-week hiatus.
Boom.
I got a few comments for you, Bryan, if you don't mind.
See, I should tell our listeners, Morris is the academic among us, and so I knew you'd have opinions on this.
Well, first of all, the whole half-life idea, you saw that in motion with Fauci and the way people were getting all over Fauci and all over disease control and all that stuff when they would say, well, now you're saying this and now you're saying that. They're saying this and that because their knowledge of the situation has changed. It had a very short half-life
Right.
because we're
We
discovering
now
new
have
things
new information
about COVID. And you know what? You want new information. That's good.
Right.
The COVID research had a very short half-life. Second comment. It's bad enough trying to discern shit from Shinola, if you will, the good from the bad, when you already have tools in place that we fight against on a daily basis on a good day when we're not being delusional, things like cognitive dissonance, things like bias, things like inbuilt cognitive functions that we have that make it harder to discern between fact and fiction, right? And then you put on top of it this just absolute stubbornness of, well, I know that you're telling me it's like this. There was this piece I read. It was a humor piece in the New Yorker where these two little girls get into a fight over whether or not Dumbo is an elephant. And the one girl, despite all of but she's got big floppy ears like his mama and a big trunk. Dumbo is not an elephant, but he sucks water through his trunk and he eats peanuts. Dumbo is not an elephant. And it just, it gets worse and worse and worse.
Right.
Okay. So a couple of other quick comments. When you refer to the dinosaurs, and I can never pronounce the name. What's the name of the place in the Yucatan?
Chicxulub.
Okay. I first thought when you were referring to what killed the dinosaurs, I thought you were referring to my story on Joseph Pujol, the farter of the Moulin Rouge. So I'm glad you cleared that for me.
Yes, all the dinosaurs were killed by a huge fart. Yeah.
And then secondly, when you're talking about the alternative facts and Kellyanne Conway, really, I mean, shouldn't she be terrorizing Ripley and the rest of the cast of the Nostromo somewhere?
Yeah, I mean, you can't. It is very, very difficult to argue with an idiot, and that's. I find that I am frequently in a position where I want to, even though I know it's fruitless, and these pundits keep letting these people come on the air. It's like, why do you do that? Why do you give them any air whatsoever? If you know that they're going to spew complete bullshit that is not based in anything but what they their dreamland, their little fairyland, and then you don't call them on it. I mean, the media are just allowing themselves to get fucked in the ass, frankly, most frankly, most Democrats as well. How spineless, utterly spineless can you be to allow these folks to just run you down and continue to spew things that are clearly undeniably false? And they come on, well, we think it's clear that the evidence is there that these voting machines, blah blah blah, and they're given the air. They're given. It's mind blowing.
And we've got these machines that can read the bamboo insignias that show that it comes from a Chinese ballot, which makes it part of the space laser that comes down. And by the time you're done, they've covered up with so much bullshit that it takes you forever to dig out of it. And by the time you dig out of it, you've gone to commercial break, right? And then you have to start all over again,
right,
when you come back from commercial break. So
unfortunately, at this point in time, I can't name, I don't think, a single prominent person in media that I think is worth a damn. I'm struggling to think of one, and I can't think of a single. Well, two or three perhaps Democrats who I think are even proximate to sane. Just like, what are you doing? What are you doing?
Well,
haha. No,
I'm depressed. I'm depressed now. And
welcome back.
Yeah. Let's go back to that guy who was farting a lot. Let's go back.
So next week we're gonna just do an endless series of funny curse words. We'll do like 30 of them. They have a little palate cleanser.
just go through and read out funny last names from the phone book. Throckmorton.
Mhm.
Okay, well, there you go, folks. What are facts and a little story about protest? And that's what we are here at Dream Idiots. Sometimes it's wacky, sometimes it's not. I hope we've given you something to think about and something to discuss with folks in a calm and rational manner, or not. If that's your groove, hey, whatever. We're looking to, at least as far as I'm concerned, I think we're on a good stretch now to have all new episodes for the foreseeable future. I know that we both have a lot of stories in the bank ready to go. So thanks for coming along for the ride with us, and we will see you next time on episode 41 of Dream Idiots.
Yep. Thanks a lot, folks. Keep listening and sharing and doing those things, and shoot us some reviews and ratings if you get a chance. And we're going to be back with many, many weeks in a row with new episodes. So we'll be back again real soon.
Bye. Be good to each other.